Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into some EU tax regulations,
Uh-huh.
specifically something called DAC6.
Okay.
Now, I know when you hear tax regulations, you're probably thinking,
Yeah.
oh, this is going to be boring, but stick with us.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's way more interesting than it sounds.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of like if you imagine the EU is like shining this giant spotlight on
Yeah.
potentially sneaky tax maneuvers,
Right.
trying to like catch companies red-handed when they're trying to like dodge taxes in different countries.
Yeah.
That's essentially what DIC6 is all about.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
The EU has become really concerned about
Right.
companies exploiting loopholes to avoid paying their fair share,
Uh-huh.
especially when it comes to cross-border transactions.
Right.
So DAC6 is really their attempt to try to level the playing field and ensure greater transparency in international taxation.
So DIC6 is kind of like the EU's tax watchdog,
Yeah.
keeping a close eye on all those tricky cross-border deals.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
But how does it actually work? What's the mechanism for actually
Yeah.
catching these tax dodgers?
Well, so at the heart of DTANC is this concept of reportable arrangements.
Oh.
So these are specific types of cross-border tax deals that have certain characteristics.
Oh, okay.
And we call these characteristics hallmarks.
Hallmarks. Okay.
And these hallmarks indicate a potential risk of tax avoidance.
Right.
You can think of them kind of like red flags
Yeah.
that signal to the tax authorities that something might be a little bit fishy.
Okay, so let's say a company is involved in one of these reportable arrangements.
Right.
What happens then? Who's responsible for making sure that everything's above board?
Yeah, so that's where the roles of intermediaries and taxpayers come in.
Okay.
So intermediaries are the ones who design, market, or help to implement these reportable arrangements.
Uh-huh.
Think tax advisors, lawyers, accountants,
Yeah.
basically anyone who helps to structure these complex deals.
So they're kind of like the architects of these potentially
Yeah.
questionable tax strategies?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
And they have a responsibility under DA6 to report these arrangements to the tax authorities.
Gotcha.
But it's not just on them.
Right.
Taxpayers, the companies or individuals who ultimately benefit from these arrangements,
Uh-huh.
they also have obligations under DA6.
Okay, so it's kind of like a
Yeah.
checks and balances to keep everyone accountable.
Exactly. It's a system of shared responsibility
Gotcha.
to ensure transparency and prevent anyone from slipping through the cracks.
But with all this talk about intermediaries and taxpayers and reportable arrangements,
Yeah.
I have to ask, what about the compliance officer? Where do they
Where do they fit in?
fit into all this?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Compliance officers play a crucial role in a DC6 world.
Okay.
They're essentially on the front lines,
Right.
responsible for ensuring that their company complies with these regulations,
Uh-huh.
which means that they need to have a really deep understanding of what constitutes a reportable arrangement.
Okay.
They need to be able to identify potential red flags within their organization
Right.
and ensure that their company has robust procedures in place to meet reporting requirements.
So it sounds like the compliance officer has a pretty hefty responsibility here.
Oh, yeah, it's a big job.
They need to be like a tax detective, constantly on the lookout for anything suspicious.
Exactly.
But what are some of the specific things that they need to watch out for?
Yeah.
What are some examples of these hallmarks that could trigger a DAC6 report?
Well, let's get into that.
Okay.
So the hallmarks, I think, are really the heart of DC6.
Okay.
They're kind of like,
Okay.
think of it this way.
Okay.
You're trying to put a puzzle together,
Yeah.
but some of the pieces are like intentionally designed to be
Mm-hmm.
misleading
Okay.
or hidden.
Yeah.
Those tricky pieces are like the hallmarks.
Okay.
They're like subtle indicators that could point to
Right.
a bigger picture of tax avoidance.
Okay, so it's not just about blatant tax evasion.
Right.
It's about these more nuanced arrangements
Yeah.
that could be used to exploit the system.
Exactly. And that's why understanding these hallmarks is so important.
Right.
And there are actually 5 main categories of these hallmarks,
5 categories.
each designed to catch
Oh.
a different type of potentially problematic
Wow.
tax arrangement.
5 categories. That sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It is a lot.
Can you give us just like a quick rundown of what
Yeah.
those categories entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
let's start with the first category.
Okay.
So this one focuses on arrangements that primarily benefit from obtaining a tax advantage.
Okay.
So imagine a company that structures a transaction in a really overly complex way,
Okay.
just to take advantage of a loophole or a mismatch in tax laws between 2 countries.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that this hallmark is designed to catch.
So it's not just about whether a company is reducing its taxes, it's about how they're doing it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that they're not playing fast and loose with the rules.
Right, right.
Right.
Okay, so that's the first category. What about number 2?
Okay, so the second category focuses on arrangements involving
Okay.
deductible cross-border payments,
Uh-huh.
where the recipient is in a non-cooperative jurisdiction
Okay.
or benefits from a preferential tax regime.
Okay.
So remember those infamous tax havens that we always hear about?
Yeah.
This hallmark is designed to shine a light on transactions
Right.
that involve those jurisdictions.
So it's about making sure that companies aren't trying to shift profits to countries with
Exactly.
super low tax rates or
Questionable.
questionable tax practices.
Tax practices. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so what about number 3?
Okay, so number 3 is all about transparency and beneficial ownership.
Okay.
So DAC6 really wants to prevent companies from using
Right.
opaque structures or shell companies.
Right, to hide their assets or income.
Uh-huh.
So any arrangement that obscures the true ownership or control of assets could raise a red flag.
Transparency is key.
Transparency is key.
Sounds like DC6 is really cracking down on anyone who tries to hide in the shadows.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, what about the other 2 categories?
Okay, so the fourth category gets into the nitty-gritty
Okay.
of asset transfers.
Okay.
So it focuses on arrangements where the value of the assets being transferred is difficult to determine.
Right.
This could be a red flag because it makes it harder for tax authorities to track the true value of the transaction and ensure that the appropriate taxes are being paid.
It sounds like DC6 is leaving no stone unturned.
It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay, what's the 5th and final category?
Okay, so the fifth category
Okay.
deals with arrangements that involve standardized documentation or structures
Uh-huh.
that could be used to disguise the true purpose of a transaction.
Okay.
So you can kind of think of it like there's these prepackaged tax products that are marketed
Yeah.
as a way to reduce taxes. But they might actually be designed to exploit loopholes or obscure the real nature of the deal.
So DC6 is kind of saying, we're on to you. Don't try to hide behind
Exactly.
fancy legal jargon or pre-made templates.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
these hallmarks aren't just about catching bad guys.
Right.
They're also about encouraging companies to be more thoughtful and transparent in their tax planning.
So it's about fostering a culture of
Exactly.
responsible tax behaviors.
Tax behavior. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not just about compliance for compliance's sake.
Right.
It's about promoting ethical tax practices
Yeah.
and pushing companies to think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
It's not just about checking boxes.
Right.
It's about doing business in a way that's
Right.
ethically sound. Right, but let's say a compliance officer has identified a potential red flag,
Well-
one of these hallmarks we've been discussing.
Right.
What happens next? What's the actual process for reporting
Yeah, what do they actually have to do?
under DACs?
Right. So the reporting process can vary
Okay.
a little bit depending on the specific country.
Uh-huh.
But generally, it involves gathering all of the relevant information about the arrangement.
Okay.
Like who are the parties involved? What's the structure of the transaction?
Mm-hmm.
What are the potential tax advantages?
Right.
And then submitting all of that to the tax authorities,
Okay.
usually through some kind of online portal.
So it's a pretty detailed process, requires a lot of
Yeah.
attention to detail.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And the deadlines for reporting can be pretty tight.
All right.
So compliance officers really need to be organized and efficient.
Yeah.
They're essentially the gatekeepers
Yeah.
responsible for making sure that their companies are meeting
Right.
their reporting obligations under DAC6.
I bet it can feel pretty overwhelming for compliance officers.
Yeah.
Especially when they're dealing with these complex cross-border
Yeah.
transactions and these constantly evolving tax laws.
Yeah. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a compliance officer
Well,
who's feeling a little bit intimidated by all this?
my first piece of advice would be don't panic.
Okay.
It might seem really daunting at first,
Right.
but you don't have to become a tax expert overnight.
Right.
Just start by breaking down the task into smaller,
Okay.
more manageable steps.
Uh-huh.
So familiarize yourself with those 5 hallmark categories
Right.
and develop a system for identifying
Okay.
potential red flags within your organization.
So it's about taking a strategic step-by-step approach
Exactly.
rather than trying to tackle everything at once.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to seek guidance from external experts.
Right.
If you need help understanding the intricacies of DI6 or setting up your reporting procedures, there are a lot of resources available. You don't have to go it alone.
That's good to hear. It sounds like collaboration is key here, both
Collaboration is huge.
internally with other departments
Yeah,
and externally
for
with
sure.
tax advisors or consultants.
Absolutely. Reach
Yeah.
out to your colleagues in tax, legal, and finance. They can offer really valuable insights.
Right.
And if you need additional support, don't hesitate to bring in external expertise.
Right.
Remember, you're not alone in this.
Right.
There's a whole community of compliance professionals out there
Yeah.
who are grappling with DAC6, and there are resources and expertise available
Right.
to help you navigate these challenges.
That's reassuring to know.
Yeah.
So for all those compliance officers out there feeling overwhelmed, just remember, take a deep breath,
Take a deep breath.
break it down into manageable steps.
Yep.
And don't hesitate to ask for help.
Ask for help. Exactly.
Okay, good advice.
And remember, at the end of the day, DI6 is about creating a more transparent and equitable international tax system.
Right.
We're all working towards a common goal here.
That's a good point. It's not just about compliance for compliance's sake.
Right.
It's about promoting fairness and preventing companies from gaining an unfair advantage by
Exactly.
exploiting loopholes or engaging in questionable tax practices.
It's about creating a level playing field
Right.
where businesses compete on their merits,
Right.
not their ability to manipulate tax laws.
And it's about ensuring that governments have the resources they need to provide
Absolutely.
essential services to their citizens.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, that's something worth striving for.
For sure.
It sounds like DAC6 is playing a crucial role in shaping a more responsible
I
and
think so.
sustainable global business environment.
Yeah, I agree.
But as we've seen, it's also creating new challenges for companies and compliance officers who need to
Right.
stay ahead of the curve and adapt to these
For sure.
evolving regulations.
Absolutely. DA6 is just one piece of a larger puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a significant step towards greater transparency and accountability in international taxation.
Right.
And as the global economy becomes increasingly interconnected,
Right.
I think we can expect to see even more emphasis
Yeah.
on these types of measures in the future.
Yeah, it sounds like we're at a turning point
I think so too.
where the old ways of doing business are no longer acceptable.
Yeah, they're not going to fly anymore.
Companies that want to thrive in this new landscape are going to need to prioritize transparency,
Absolutely.
ethical conduct,
Yeah.
and a genuine commitment to playing by the rules.
I completely agree.
So for all those business leaders and decision makers out there,
Yeah.
the message is clear. Adapt or be left behind.
Adapt or die.
DAC6 is a wake-up call, signaling a new era of transparency and responsibility in international business.
Well said.
That's a powerful message, it sounds like. DC6 is not just a set of regulations, but a catalyst
Yeah.
for a broader cultural shift in the way
I think that's right.
businesses operate on a global scale.
Yeah, I think the EDC6 is forcing companies to confront
Uh-huh.
some fundamental questions about their values, their ethics, and their role in society.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think this is going to lead to a more sustainable and equitable global economy
Right.
where everyone benefits.
That's an inspiring thought. It sounds like DC6 is not just about preventing tax avoidance, but about
Yeah.
shaping a better future for business and society as a whole.
I couldn't agree more. It's about creating a world where businesses operate with integrity,
Uh-huh.
contribute their fair share, and play a positive role
Yeah.
in their communities and the world at large.
Well, it sounds like we've reached the end of our deep dive into D6.
Yeah,
It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation.
it has been. It's been great chatting with you.
I hope our listeners have gained a deeper understanding of this complex topic and its
Yeah.
far-reaching implications.
Yeah, me too. It's been a pleasure sharing my insights with you and your listeners.
And for all of you listening out there, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a more transparent and ethical global economy.
For sure.
Until next time, happy diving.
All right, so we're back.
Back again,
And we've been talking all about DICs.
unpacking it all.
Yeah, those EU tax regulations that are really designed to shed light on
Yeah,
potentially sneaky,
the tricky stuff.
international tax maneuvers. It's been quite a journey.
It has been a lot to cover.
Yeah.
We've gone through those hallmarks, like you said,
Yeah.
those little red flags that signal that something might be a bit off.
Yeah.
And we've also talked about how important compliance officers are
Right.
in making sure that companies are following the rules.
And you've really highlighted how it's not just about ticking boxes
No, not at all.
and filing reports. It's about creating this culture of transparency and ethical conduct in the whole global business arena.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that DS6 is really a game changer in that regard.
But what I think is really interesting is what it tells us about the future
Okay.
of international business.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
This is where it gets good.
So you're saying DD6 is a sign of things to come?
I think so.
Like a glimpse into the future where transparency just reigns supreme?
I think that's exactly right.
Okay.
The world is moving toward greater financial transparency.
Okay.
And companies that try to cling to those old ways of doing business,
Right.
The ones operating in the shadows,
Right.
they're going to find it increasingly difficult to hide.
So like those days of exploiting loopholes and stashing assets in offshore tax havens?
Yeah, those days are numbered.
Those days are numbered, okay?
I think so.
Wow.
DD6 is just one piece of the puzzle, but it's a significant step towards a more level playing field for businesses operating across borders. And this shift toward transparency is going to have a ripple effect on everything.
Okay.
It's going to change how companies structure their operations, where they invest, how they make decisions.
So it's not just about compliance departments scrambling to keep up with new regulations.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's about a fundamental shift in the way that companies think about their tax strategy.
Their whole approach to doing business globally.
Their whole approach.
Yeah, it's a whole new ballgame.
Wow. So companies are really going to have to think long and hard about the tax implications.
Yeah, they can't just fly by the seat of their pants anymore of their actions and make sure they're operating in a way that's both ethical and sustainable.
No more cutting corners or chasing quick wins that could backfire later on.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like DAC6 is pushing companies to adopt this more holistic view.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Considering not just the letter of the law, but also the spirit of it.
Yeah, it's about aligning your tax strategy with your long-term business goals.
Right.
And building a reputation for integrity and responsibility.
Because at the end of the day, trust is everything.
Trust is everything.
In business, yeah. Especially in the global marketplace.
And that trust is earned by demonstrating a commitment to ethical conduct.
Exactly.
Not just trying to find these clever ways to avoid paying taxes.
It's about doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
Not just because you're afraid of getting caught.
So for all those business leaders out there, the message is clear. Embrace transparency.
Yeah.
Operate ethically, and make sure your tax strategy is aligned with your values.
And your long-term vision.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And remember, compliance is not just about avoiding penalties.
Right.
It's about building a sustainable business.
Okay.
Attracting investors who share your values.
Right.
And fostering a positive relationship with your stakeholders.
It's about doing the right thing, even when no one's watching.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our
It's been a good one.
Deep dive into DC6.
That has.
It's been really enlightening.
It's been a pleasure being here.
And to all of you listening, we encourage you to keep diving deep.
Keep learning.
Keep asking those tough questions and keep pushing for a more transparent and ethical.
Absolutely.
Until next time.